Hey, I'm No Matter. It's that time of year again. This year I decided to focus more on reviewing the discographies of artists that I like than discovering new albums. Despite that, I broke last year's listening record. The artists represented in all of these albums have audiences of varying sizes, approval ratings of varying extents, and music of various kinds. It's mostly underground EDM, indie, and pop, but we've got a smattering of other genres across the master list. As always, my initial thoughts, including content warnings, for most of these albums are on albumoftheyear.org, so if you're interested, go check out my profile there. These top 10 albums did more than just impress me. They shaped my year in ways I cannot understate. So without further ado, let's hop into my top 10 albums of the year. By playing through most of their backlog this year, I found this band incredibly consistent since their breakout record 10 years ago, and even beforehand. Despite that, when they announced a new album last year, I wasn't necessarily expecting them to reach the level of my favorite album from them. I was just excited to see how this overarching story they've been telling would progress. But when they announced another album this year that would put a bow on the story once and for all, the pressure was on. I mean, if this wasn't one of their best albums to date, it would be an undeniable L for the band. Well, an epic ending to an epic saga, 21 Pilots concludes their Clancy storyline with a bang. I would have been surprised if the band tied up all the loose ends, and they didn't. The story ends basically right where it began, but in a way that's satisfyingly open-ended. More fun for me than rooting for Clancy was watching people figure out what the narrative even is, and the narrative of this album makes the whole saga make so much more sense in a way that really impressed me even more about the band. For such a quick turnaround on such a summatory album, it's hard to believe we got such a banger ending to such a banger series.
Most are blown down in a storm, but the wind was...
In many respects, this album is quintessential for the band. Sure, you've got the driving drum grooves, the catchy guitar riffs, the dynamic singing, the bright synthesizers, as normal, but look past all that at the inclusion of his daughters in Raw Fear, at the inclusion of Josh Dunn's singing in Drum Show, at the faith basis of Downstairs, at the nod to a small band in Robot Voices, at the fan samples in Center Mass, at the outro sample in One Way. The list goes on, and you find a summary of the band's whole focus. It's the people that have blessed them over the years in ways that they never could have imagined. That homage increases the heart of this album tenfold, and I think for that reason, this album really communicates what the band has been all about this whole time. An album that tells a story is nothing new to me, but I love to hear one done right. Especially when the presentation style of the story is so innovative and so well executed that it immediately shoots up to my top 10 after having heard it so late in the year.
So I go back and forth, wishing life could feel like it.
This is the only album I've ever covered in one of these countdowns where the songs aren't what make the album. Don't get me wrong, the songs are really good. They're fun, well-written, and even emotive in their upbeat yet wistful folk style. But the story sections, which tell a story around the song, it infuses the songs with so much more meaning that the story sections and song sections become inseparable from each other. And that could be a tragic weakness or a great strength for an album. And in this case, I think it made for a uniquely cohesive listening experience that keeps drawing you in even through its longer runtime.
I think that I could use a bit of nostalgia, 'cause I don't like how I've been.
The story album format pays homage to the old radio show format in that a cast of actors, in this case two, depict a story through spoken dialogue and Foley ambiance. So you have your story sections, as I mentioned, acted stellarly, by the way, and with such palpable chemistry, and your song sections, which support the vibes and themes presented in those story sections in exemplary form. Exploring the disillusionment that comes from trying to recreate or revisit nostalgic memories instead of moving on from them, Northwest Stories weaves a clever, heavy, heartbreaking story that sticks with me for a long while after each listen. It could have been just fine as an EP, but I'm so glad that they decided to do something deeper and more meaningful with the project.
Till we see the sunrise.
Several artists made a fundamental shift in their styles this year. Jake and Shelby's album took a sadder turn than normal, Jacob Collier was much more acoustic than normal this year, and Skybreak entered his Half-Blood era. But perhaps one of the most underestimated shifts of the year came from Fox Stevenson in his lyrical shift in this sophomore album. And though I deeply appreciated the lyrics in his previous projects, this shift was well worth making. Now, what is this shift I'm talking about? Because on the surface, this seems like just another Fox Stevenson album that kind of carries the formula that his projects normally do. Well, up to this point, his philosophical claims came with a sort of bravado, a sort of sage advice from an unlikely source type of authority. But in this album, he doesn't know all of the answers. In fact, he's coming to realize he knows hardly any of them. He sits in those questions, in that tension, and by doing so, becomes more relatable than ever before. Amid all that uncertainty comes just as much playfulness and genuinity as you'd expect from a record of his. As usual, nothing is off limits here, whether it be a kazoo intro or a sine wave solo or an a cappella choir section or a pensive orchestral movement. And those are just the icing on the cake of satisfying drum beats and EDM drops of varying subgenres and some good old drum and bass, just as you'd expect from him. Having everything I'd expect and way more should have been the expectation given his previous projects, but even so, it still blew me away. This next album served as a companion piece to a book that I've never read, admittedly, but based on the album title and the song titles, I knew it'd be a deeply personal and deeply meaningful project, at least to the artist. Turns out, it became an eye-opening project for me as well.
I know where I come from, yeah. How could I push me away? I'm used to counting hours of the day. I used to lay in bed and decay.
Every time I thought I figured out where this album was going, it switched up the vibe on me. From soothing indie styles to groovy pop styles to anthems, even to some ventures into rock and rap. This album was a great introduction to the different shades of Saint Finnikin. The attention to details in the beats and ear candies, along with the deeply intentional dynamic quality of the vocal performances, shows the artist's contagious passion in everything he's saying and how he's saying it. It gets into some heavy territory for the sake of inner growth, and nothing could prepare me for just the sheer amount of what I would get with this album. The stories told in it, the social commentaries within it, the heart behind it, everything is so well thought out and so well executed.
If you wanna cruise, pick the location. I don't need a tea on a situation, only tea.
Now, I can't vouch for the book, The Inner Work, but I do feel the need to warn you about the spiritual premises behind the album, because as a follower of Christ myself and a continuous seeker of truth, I believe spiritual truths are just as true as empirically measured truths, and that religions are not interchangeable. That being said, Saint Finnikin himself has this to say in an Instagram post explaining the album's spiritual core. Now feel free to pause and take in the quote, but it basically encourages syncretism, choosing portions of different religious traditions and religious doctrines to engineer your own system of spiritual beliefs. While I feel it's important to establish that I reject this method of building a worldview and this method of personal healing, finding it to be counterproductive in seeking truth and just as costly in the long term as it is relieving in the short term, I do find several of the messages in this album to be helpful and healing perspectives. I encourage discernment in listening to this album, as finding, not just seeking truth, is severely underrated in the healing process. This album deserves not just a cautious listen, but a deep, intentional, careful listen, as it really is a marvel of a work that should not by any means be glossed over. Normally, the albums I have in my top 10 speak to me lyrically in some way, on top of dazzling me with the instrumentals, and hey, that's just the nature of my music taste, but sometimes the music speaks for itself. Sometimes the music carries a vibe so immaculate and progresses so powerfully that there's hardly any need for lyrics. A simple message, but no simple feat. This album was always gonna make it in here somewhere. Neddie has had an insane year, this being one of 2 albums he released this year that could hardly be more different from each other. This first album takes a more pensive tone and carries with it a message of living life to the fullest. The narration samples throughout steadily observe the apathy of those around the narrator who have nothing to live for, and inspire the narrator to live for something. It's a simple message, but it's well told and doesn't take anything away from the breath of fresh air that is each of these instrumental songs. Neddie had so many musical niches in his bag for this one, from future rhythm to drill to heavy glitch hop to love trap to double time drum and bass. In many respects, it was like a blast to the past. But tying them all together was a tangible running vibe that was so unique to this album compared to anything else I heard all year. It was a bit of a grower for me, but that's not to say that I wasn't immediately floored by parts of this before I eventually became floored with the whole thing.
Something that means something to them. If it doesn't mean anything, it doesn't mean anything.
First single, May 19th, 2022. Final single, October 11th, 2024. Album release, May 1st, 2025, and I was starting to wonder if this album was ever going to come out, and I'm glad it did. Although living life to the fullest is important, sometimes you just need to take some time for yourself to regroup and to refocus. In so many ways, this album's progression felt tangibly like such a retreat. It begins with deep tension, then transitions into deep peace, then puts the worries of life into perspective, then comes to terms with the process of moving on from them, then goes back into tension as the retreat comes close to ending, then ends with a bit of quiet courage to step back out into the world. Every time I've felt rejuvenated from a retreat of some kind, it's been through a similar process, and I've rarely seen an album bake this level of relatability into the very structure of its track list like this. I loved Asher's previous EP, Internet Girlfriend, and was looking forward to hearing how he would refine his style with this project. Just like in that project, for which this could easily be a natural narrative follow-up, the instrumentals support the story thoroughly. The complex percussion, the catchy vocal chops, the emotive piano melodies, the groovy synth patterns, everything was so harmonious. The lyrics also take more of a faith-based direction, which I was excited to hear as it wasn't a subject that he had written about much up to this point. Even so, he doesn't get so lofty in his language that those with other worldviews couldn't relate or benefit from the album. In fact, even though this album has a lot of Christian themes, I would recommend this album to anybody, regardless of background. Not just because this is his debut, but this will be a timeless album in his discography. I'm confident of it. It'll probably be a classic in my music tastes as well. As I mentioned, I write little reviews on each album I listen to if they're to be found on this website called albumoftheyear.org. The user base on that website seems to find rap and hip-hop albums in particular extremely polarizing. They're either absolute trash or instant album of the year. On the latter end, there's one rapper that has become a darling of the user base en masse. So I figured I'd check him out, and no one could have prepared me for the sheer spectacle of what I got out of his new album. I'm just now realizing this is the third album so far that tells a fictional story, and we still have one more to go, so new bias discovered, I guess. But this is a gorgeous telling of an aimless journey on the sea that reminds the seaman of what is most important to him on land. Complete with sonic motifs, epic characters, and even a companion short film, this album moves through R&B, hip-hop, and indie styles to build tension and release it in a similar pattern to the waves on the ocean. A mysterious beginning precedes a sweet yet conflicted middle, which precedes one of the wildest endings to an album that I have ever heard. Quadeca's sound design is absolutely beautiful and strangely haunting as well, while maintaining the balance between the groovy and the explosive. It's hard to do justice to the insane journey that this album takes you on. It's something that just needs to be experienced. As I mentioned earlier, some artists go through fundamental style shifts and have albums to reflect those shifts. The creator of this next album always seems to release his albums in between changing styles, which is to say, every album has elements of his previous album's new style, but also brings something new to the table. This is no exception. And some were disappointed by this artist going full-on shoegaze, but I wouldn't have it any other way.
Don't you wanna make it up?
Continuing the nebulous overarching story that, yes, is fictional, that Acloudyskye has been building for several years now, this album feels like a bit of a rest stop in the journey. But during that brief rest period, there's quite a bit going on as the characters gain a more focused perspective on why they're on this journey in the first place. And they do so to the tune of powerful guitar work, driving drum patterns, and soaring vocals. This project shows yet more improvement for Acloudyskye, just like every album before it. The mixing is better, the vocal performances are more confident, the melodies are stronger, and the lyrics pack more of a punch than ever before. Although this may feel like a simpler project than his past two albums, it is a very compelling entry in the saga that makes me unbearably eager for what he has next. Hopefully a bit of full-on shoegaze along with the next evolution of his style. There's always something special about a personal friend topping one of these lists. Now, I promise you, I hold my friend's music to the same standards as anyone else. I just happen to have really, really talented friends. His departure from the International House of Prayer in Kansas City made for a turning point fitting for an album. But what Jeremy gives us is not blame or bitterness in light of the controversy the organization found itself in. It's excruciating struggle toward a brighter step forward. Production-wise, you get everything you'd expect from him, but on a grander scale, from catchy vocal chops to glitchy pad patterns to funky beats, but he does experiment quite a bit as well. The album is also jam-packed with beautiful lyrics that are deeply thoughtful and clever while being brutally real and approachable. And despite the theming lending itself more to a solo album, there were a lot of collaborators on this thing, and they were all fantastic.
If you walk behind, will you tell me?
There's a line in just about every song here that teaches me a valuable lesson and really speaks to me. From hindsight, I spent too much time fine with being blind. From What If It's Just For You? Will I Be Fulfilled If No One Sees It? That is the art that we're creating. What if it's just for you and I? You being God, I being the artist. The entire spoken word section in Your Listening, incredibly powerful. And the entire therapy session in Will It Just Happen? How Will You Ever Know? So much tension in there. Just the list of ways that this album has personally benefited me is too broad and too deep to express in just 2-ish minutes, but suffice it to say, man, is this a special work of art. Before we get to my favorite album of the year, I have to shout out some honorable mentions. So as always, here are some other great albums that almost made the list.
I hope the world rises up to meet you, and when it doesn't, you climb down. It's 2 a.m. in the morning, and I can't fall. You can't win. It's good for the seeds.
My number one pick this year holds no surprise or controversy. Now, the 2024 singles for this album were quite good, but I was starting to wonder if it was shaping up to be this artist's weakest project yet, which is ironic considering the theme of this album. After all, he appeared on a top 10 list of mine the past 2 years, so it was going to be really easy to fall short of that standard, and he kind of did it to himself. But not even a 10 single rollout could have prepared me for the sheer power this album was about to deliver.
Now I'm arguing louder and louder to no one exactly to gather momentum.
Drawing from a wide array of musical traditions, Sam weaves down-to-earth messages with cosmic atmosphere to deliver his heaviest, hardest-hitting, most desperately emotional album yet. Unlike admittedly many Christian artists in the space today, he chooses not to skip directly to the Sunday school answers, that being the ones in danger of dismissing grief and ignoring the trauma of its impact. Instead, he is very open and clear about sitting in the tension, and the runtime makes it very clear that that's the case. Now, it doesn't prevent him from reaching an answer by the end, but he paves quite enough road to arrive at that answer maturely, rather than prematurely or too late. It has the strengths of every previous Sam Bowman project, just strengthened and reinforced and built upon to unprecedented measures. Also, the instrumentals for each song hit each corresponding feeling right on the head. It really feels like Sam has perfected all the things he's become known for throughout the years with this album. The feels he plucks, the soaring synth walls, the passionate vocal performances, the theological rigor. Now, I'm not excluding room for growth here, and I'm not claiming that he can never top this. For the latter, I've clearly been wrong before. But this right here, at least for now, this is the magnum opus of Sam Bowman and the best album to come out of 2025. And those are my favorite albums of 2025. Let me know what you think of these albums, what some of your favorite albums from this year are, what you think of some of my takes. I am so down to have discussions in the comment section. But until then, I'll see you guys later. No Matter out.